It's not until you see death in its truest form that you understand it. I'm 21 years old. First fatal accident I go to, I got 1 month on the job, and it's 2 kids on a motorcycle with a truck on Route 202 in Flemington, New Jersey. I don't have to go into the grisly details, but I could feel my body. There was something different. We got back to the state police station. I went into the stall of the bathroom, and I cried my eyes out. And I did it quietly, and I sobbed quietly in hopes that no other trooper would hear me. Because from my view, they would not want to go on patrol with me. They would think I was too weak to do this job. Yeah. And yet when I had the courage to tell that story to a group of troopers, when it was over, half of them came up and said, I went through the same thing. Yeah. What is personal is universal.
This is Inside the Life with Giovanni and Dutch, produced by the Mob Museum. Giovanni, Rocco, and Dutch McAlpin are former police and federal task force operatives. They infiltrated drug cartels, outlaw motorcycle groups, and the mafia. Now, they share their stories, along with others who have gone inside the life.
Welcome back to Inside the Life with Dutch and me, Giovanni. In this episode, we welcome Bob Delaney, who rose to the top of 2 elite organizations, a highly decorated trooper with the New Jersey State Police, and a highly respected professional basketball referee in the NBA, the National Basketball Association.
His New Jersey State Trooper identity didn't just stay with him. His undercover identity didn't just stay with him and define him. His NBA career as a high-level NBA referee, you would think one of those things he would want to stand up and be proud of it. He's just saying, I'm just Bob Delaney all the way through.
He didn't have somebody teaching him how to do this. He's a kid from Paterson, New Jersey. Yeah. That just... he really went after what he wanted. He had a passion for it, and he saw it, and he went and did his thing. So we're just going to jump into it and welcome you to Inside the Life. We're just shooting before this started, and I know a lot about you. I really talked to Dutch about you a lot, but I guess we should start. I think it's important because I've heard you describe your childhood before, and it's very unique in the way you describe with being around. I especially want you to tell a story about the nuns. Yeah. Because it's so great and it's relatable. So you grew up in Paterson, New Jersey?
Yeah, I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, right across the river from New York City. And, I grew up in an Irish Catholic family. Mm-hmm. My dad was a World War II veteran, truly raised by a village with my grandparents, aunts, and uncles, all having an influence on my life. We all lived within a couple of blocks of each other. My father's 2 brothers, his sister, my grandparents. And, I went to St. Mary's Grammar School, Paterson, New Jersey, and everything was around that school. It was around the church and the school. You lived in the community. So Paterson was this small community, and while it's a large city, it's still a small community. And so St. Mary's Grammar School was the whole life. And, the nuns had a big influence on you, being at the church on Sundays, and you see the whole community. And I'm in like 4th grade, 5th grade, and I get caught doing something wrong in school. And Sister Joseph Rozier tells me I'm going to be punished. And before she told me what the punishment was, I said, Sister, Jimmy Dillell is doing it too. I gave up my best friend in a heartbeat. And, the ring that says the good sisters are married to God, that's also there to put welts on your head. She cracked me. She gave me a shot. And she said, Delaney, you don't tell on your friends. And it's an unwritten rule on a schoolyard. You don't tell on your friends. And even when I got into state police, I was a trooper for about 3 weeks, and I got called to division headquarters to speak with IAB, the Internal Affairs Bureau. When I left the station, it was like I was leaving my grandmother's house. Right. All the troopers were outside. Don't tell them nothing, kid. And they came back and you learned how to do an IAB report. Yeah. I have no knowledge of the aforementioned. Mm-hmm. And it was this whole mindset in our society that you don't tell. The kids saw, stitches get stitches. Mm-hmm. So this whole mindset is you don't tell anybody.
Right.
And then to get pulled into a job that you become friends with people and tell on them, it takes a toll on you.
It does. Now, you were in sports, obviously. You played sports, which is later in life, your life took a turn and went that way. But you were a basketball player in high school?
Yeah, no, in high school I was. But in grammar school, in elementary school, Little League was the big thing. Mm-hmm. And so the St. Mary's Blues and the St. Mary's Whites. And that's an interesting story about the community as well. I went out for the team, and it was only the St. Mary's Blues. Mm-hmm. And to get on that team was a big deal in the school. I'm at the selection process. We try out, and then we're at the school, and they're going to make a decision. My father's there, a couple of neighbors across the street, and they call names out. But there's a lot of kids there. And you start to realize everybody's not going to make the team. And so my father voices, how about we start a second team? We'll call them the Whites. I'll coach it. It was a learning of making sure you take care of other people in ways that you don't get sat down and taught lessons. He didn't have to do that. His kid wasn't playing on that team.
Yeah.
So my father was the coach of the Whites. I played on the Blues. And about 20 different guys were able to play on that team. I still hear from guys today.
Do you?
Your father, if your father didn't do that, I wouldn't have ever played.
Yeah,
And so that's that learning of you got to take care of each other kind of thing.
What'd your mom and dad do at the time? When
My dad was a state trooper.
Okay.
He World War II veteran and comes home, goes into state police. My mom worked at a bakery.
So there was no regimented, no military mindset in your house. I say that jokingly because he was in the war and he was a New Jersey State trooper.
Yeah, exactly. But it was interesting. He didn't like force that on you. Like you knew there was a structure. His two brothers were in the Army. He was 16 and a half years old, Central High School, Patterson, New Jersey. Talks his parents my grandparents into allowing him to sign up at 16 and a half, junior in high school. He leaves, goes to boot camp. By 17, he's on a battleship.
Right.
And you think about that, 16 and a half, you can't let a kid go on a bus by himself today.
Right.
Yeah.
And at 16 and a half, this guy is getting, so it's a service.
He's been driven to serve.
The family that I grew up in was service driven.
Right.
And so you pick up on that and you're exposed to it, so you see it.
You're talking about growing up with a father with great credibility, high integrity, well known in the community, state trooper.
Right.
And we've talked with mafia associates, mob associates, stuff like that, and they talk about growing up with certain privileges. You know, they could go into restaurants, skip the line, do these things. Do you think growing up with a father in a nice community like that, who's a state trooper, did you get some different kinds of respect, or get treated different, or get privileges at all?
I think that privileges were there, no doubt. But there was also another side to it, is that the expectation was higher, that you weren't allowed to get in trouble. Your father's a trooper, you should know better. That kind of thing would take place. But also growing up in that era, everybody, if you got in trouble, you were getting your rear end beat by the neighbors, as well as the teachers, as well as the priests. And by the time you got home, you were worn out.
Right.
But it was a different era. Everybody was watching out for everybody else, and everybody had permission to do something to you, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, and it
The
wasn't,
nuns are hitting you, the neighbors are hitting you.
Everybody's giving you a whack.
Yeah. And growing up in Patterson at that time, there was there's still a stronghold of mafia influence in your neighborhoods, right? In Patterson.
Yeah, and
New
what's
Jersey.
interesting, it's a great point. I wasn't aware of it.
Right.
You know, you didn't understand the underbelly of the city. You only knew that, and it's probably to your point of the privilege, is that you only knew what other cops, you knew other people of stature within the community.
Yeah.
You didn't understand about the underbelly to it.
Right. Yeah, where I grew up in Bayonne, we knew everything was out in the open. But having that trooper mindset, I think the state police understood that they were a little above everybody else when it came to law enforcement. And there was that sense of brotherhood. They didn't mingle. Like the cops in my neighborhood, they mingled amongst the gangsters.
Right,
And
right.
it was this common respect in the neighborhood, which we'll get into later as you came into my neighborhood. But during that time, it's amazing to see everything you've accomplished, but yet your childhood didn't expose you to those type of guys like I was, you know?
Yeah, no, you understood that there were some areas that you stayed away from, but you also had a distancing. You know, the state. To your point about the state police, it was founded in 1921 by Colonel Schwarzkopf, the father of the famed General Schwarzkopf, and that. He was in the military at the time when the governor of the state of New Jersey brought him down to start the New Jersey State Police. So he brought all that military bearing with him from West Point. He was an instructor at West Point at the time. And so you could see a lot of similarities in the state police. For anyone who's had the pleasure of meeting a troop on the turnpike or the parkway, our uniforms are very militaristic.
Oh, yeah, they are. But again, we'll get into it now. When did you decide you were going to follow in your father's footsteps and become a police officer?
Yeah, great point. I never thought that would ever happen in my life.
Right.
You know, it was like there's something about you look up to. I looked up to my father. I looked up to the guys that I knew, and we were an organization that you lived at the stations for 2 days, you went home for 2 days. So we were the local cops for towns that didn't have their own police department. It was like a fire department.
Yeah.
You'd live there for 2 days, go home for 2 days. So you were immersed into the community. And so I looked at it like, I can't do what they do. Yeah. I just saw them as like on a pedestal.
Right.
And I always thought of myself as probably being a teacher or a basketball coach or something along that line as I grew up. And then around my junior year of college, I realized that the NBA would not be calling for me to play. I went to college for one reason, to play ball. My thirst for knowledge came later in life. And once that took place, it was like I was driven. And they gave a test, and I passed and went through the Seagirt Training Academy, which is the State Police Academy in Seagirt, New Jersey, and graduated in 1973.
Yeah, which was an intense time. During that time, you had to be a certain build, a certain height. Right?
Yes.
They had the regulations were much different back then.
Yeah.
And I say this because it all goes to a point we'll get into in a couple minutes. But just the standards to make the academy and a police academy were such that the hurdles were huge. But to be a state trooper at that time, you had to fit the physical mold, the mental mold, the commitment. I mean, it was truly a special forces type of mentality when you went, right?
Yeah, you're 100%.
Right?
I mean, it was there was so many restrictions that are not allowed today.
Right.
Height restrictions. There was a lot of it was image.
Yeah.
About how
On and
how
off
we
the
were
job.
projecting. Yeah.
The way you carried yourself off the job, crisp, just like the uniform, like he describes.
Yeah, and I remember those days. I think it's adapted now. So you go through the Trooper Academy. You said you spent about 3 weeks in the uniform?
No, I spent, so the academy was 23 weeks to go through. Then I had a year and a half on the job when they tapped me to do the undercover job. So I was 6 months at Flemington Station. Then I went to Newton Station. And then I was in Somerville when I got a call. Well, not a call. I walked into you guys know what a squad room, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay? You walk into the squad room, they try to make you feel good about yourself, like you've got your own office. It's a little cubby hole with your name on it, and there's 30 different guys there. And there was a note to call Lieutenant Jack Liddy, Division Headquarters, Criminal Investigation Section, Organized Crime Bureau. This guy had more titles next to his name than I ever saw. And I told you, I grew up Irish Catholic. That means I wake up guilty in the morning. I thought I did something wrong. I thought I had a problem on my hands. And the other trooper said, relax, kid, give the guy a call. You probably gave a ticket to a mob guy. He works organized crime. I called the lieutenant. Short conversation. He says, you're going to be in for a while. I said, yes, sir. He said, I'll meet you in the kitchen. Every state police station had a kitchen because we lived at the stations. About an hour and a half later, I walk in. There's this intimidating figure. Lieutenant Liddy stands about 6'4". He's got meat hooks for hands. He's the kind of guy that hangs on his lapels when he speaks to you. And after a period of conversation, he asked, are you interested in doing undercover work? I said, yes, sir. I had a lot of, in the state police, when you're living at the stations, some guys like doing traffic work. Some guys like doing I hated doing the accidents. I felt like I was working for the insurance company. Right. And so I would trade off. You take my accidents, I'll take your criminal. So I had a high criminal rate. That was what was the first attention that brought him to me. And he said, you interested in doing undercover work? Yes, sir. Well, we go through the whole conversation. And he turns and walks away. I said, Lieutenant, what is it? Drugs, narcotics? Because back then we're pretty much doing buy bust on the street.
Right.
He said, you keep asking questions, you're going to be out of running. Over the next 3 weeks, I learned about what this was really taking place. The President's Organized Crime Task Force out of Washington, D.C., the FBI and New Jersey State Police were going to join forces. And when you say that today, people accept that. There were no joint task force back then. State police were on one corner, FBI was on another corner. We weren't sharing information. We're going to make the grab. You're not going to make the grab, that kind of thing. The Bureau shows up when the job's over. They take credit for it kind of mentality.
Just for the public's point of view here. We used to all sit around with our information, be like, what do you got?
Yeah.
Nothing? What do you got?
Exactly.
And then leave when we accomplish nothing, right? So at this moment in time, to take and put all these different agencies together and create this operation was probably one of the first ones ever, right?
That's why it was called Project Alpha. It was the New Jersey Joint Intelligence Operation was the technical name, but they called it Project Alpha because it was the first time that the FBI, New Jersey State Police, and the money was being funded out of Washington, D.C., and the money had to come to the state. It couldn't go to another federal agency. So it was a different kind of feeling because state police were controlling the dollars. And you had to come together as a team. And what we just described, that took time.
Yeah.
We had 3 FBI agents and 2 state troopers that were selected to do this, and we're going to start our own trucking company on the waterfront in New Jersey. The first trucking company was Mid-Atlantic Air Sea Transportation, 941 Fairmont Avenue in Elizabeth, New Jersey, entrance to the Port of Newark. Figure you put the trucking company there. We had a 16-foot truck. We had a van and a station wagon that had signs on the side, Mid-Atlantic Air Sea. We had all 5 of us were co-owners in the trucking company. That way somebody wasn't more important than somebody else. And we're wondering why the unions aren't knocking down our doors after 6 months. To cops, that's a big deal. It's it was a pimple to anybody else. It was nothing on the port. And we thought it was a big operation, and we got lucky. And getting lucky is part of this business.
Well, setting that whole thing up, like I don't know about the ports or anything, but did you have to backstop this company? Like you had to go through with your undercover identities and get the permits and all the special clearances and stuff like that? Had to take. How much time did you spend just setting up the platform itself? Do you think?
Probably months of being set up. Some of this was in progress prior to being selected to do the actual undercover work. And then it was about setting up our own backgrounds, right? So each one of us, all 5 of those undercovers, had to put together their own background, not meaning us, between the FBI and the state police. So, we did it where we went to the death records and found somebody that had died with the same ethnic sounding name, same first name. So I was born in 1951. I became a guy that was born in 1949. His name was Robert Allen Covert. Catchy name for an undercover guy, Bobby Covert. But we weren't trying to be cute or funny.
It just happened to fit. There's a real person.
And back then, covert wasn't the kind of word that it is today. You know, it was narc or, 007, whatever, term would be given to it. But so Robert Allen Covert's father was Elmer Covert. His mother was Carol Stevens. He was born in 1949. You know everything about him. I've always would hope at some point to meet his family, to help understand this child that died at birth, what that name has done in life.
Carried on.
The name has a legend, and definitely.
Absolutely.
This lieutenant that came to you, like, other than you had been a good investigator, was there something about the way you look, the way you talk, the way you are?
I think is that I grew up in Patterson. I grew up in a city. I also worked summers. Route 80 was being built at the time, which is a interstate that goes through. And by working there, that means that I was around construction. I was around trucks. And so I had somewhat of a knowledge there. I think that the fact that I went to college in New Jersey City University, which was Jersey City State back then, and I had a high arrest record. So I had a knowledge about it. And the reputation was that I could talk to, when bad guys came in, I would talk to them about helping us try and flip them. And so I think all of that, if you put it into a blender, helped direct the lieutenant to me.
When did you know it was going to be an LCN, a Cosa Nostra case that you were going to target? Did you have specific targets in mind, or they were just casting a bait out in that area to see who would bite?
Back in that time, you guys are too young to remember, but it was always spoken about as traditional organized crime's influence on legitimate business. That was a term that was being used, and and so they wanted to find that. Like, if we put a legitimate business there, how does organized crime infiltrate it? And you're looking back right now, we have so much knowledge, but we didn't have that knowledge then. And we thought they were so strict that they only dealt within their own family. When you came to realize you're going to work with anybody you can to make dollars. You're going to do whatever you have to do. And so that was a whole learning process. And that was the bait. Let's start a legitimate business, see where it goes. It wasn't set up as a sting operation, but that becomes part of it because you come to realize, okay, people are doing loads. We're going to see where things are coming off the port. And it wasn't computerized like it is today. Everything was handwritten. So all you needed was one guy on the inside. He moves that load around on the port. That's Nobody knows where it is for 6 months. It's already been gone and sold.
Yep.
And so all of these kinds of things were learning things for us. Law enforcement wasn't as knowledgeable.
Right.
It was intelligence gathering,
Yeah,
for sure, at first.
that's what it was really set up for. It was more about, let's find out how much intelligence we can get that will help us to be able to make cases.
So to Giovanni's point, you didn't really have a core group of people that you were targeting. It was more
No.
like, let's set up and just figure out how is this working? What's happening?
I'm guessing that you kind of knew what breed of shark was going to pop up first, right? You kind of knew it was going to be Cosa Nostra. It would be Italian-American influence because at that time, this is just, it's not right after On the Waterfront, the movie. We knew all the docks are controlled by the mafia back then.
Correct.
All the ports, everything coming in and out, all the trucking, all the unions. They were such a stronghold from the mob. I think it's safe to say that they knew that their target was going to be some kind of influenced organized crime coming in that puts the arm on you and says, hey, you guys, the 5 of you just open up this place here. This doesn't flow. This isn't the way things work here.
I love how he said that. 5 years.
Yes, 5 years. Yeah.
You don't hear that all the time. But
It's nice what you're doing here.
It's good to be home.
It's probably the conversation. You get to knock at the door. Hey, you got a nice place here.
Yeah.
What are you
Right.
moving?
Right.
So you knew that was kind of happening. But what I ask is, and your choice for you being the candidate to be the undercover for this, I think your relationship and your father being a trooper holds a little bit of weight too, because the trust factor. How do you pick a cop during in those years when the mafia was their strongest, most violent and active, and you're going to throw an undercover into this situation? It's got to be somebody you trust. It's got to be somebody with integrity, right? Because during that time, everything was bought and sold by the mob, including the police, local police, state police even. We had bad eggs in our batches. So the threat of putting you into that situation,
So the trooper
with no training, like
Oh, the
hats
training
off to
was
you.
minimal. It's like the things that were,
Yeah, you speak Jersey, you eat sauce,
Exactly.
you like this.
Yeah.
You ever
What I
meet
was
an
getting
Italian guy? All right, go. And that's the kind of training you probably had, right?
Yeah, and I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. And so the Delellos, the Picarellis, the Luisis were all our neighbors.
Yeah.
And I make it a point in the book to make sure you talk about, when you talk about the mob, unfortunately in our society, Italian equaled traditional organized crime. Mm-hmm. There was not one mob guy on our street.
Right.
It was guys that worked in the post office. There were guys that worked in, and so all of that kind of like bravado was being put out there. We were being taught more of who were the players that potentially could come to us. So you'd get an intelligence class probably once a week, and they would continue. Jack Liddy was an amazing boss. Ended up a captain in the state police, still alive to this day, just a great guy, great leader. And it wasn't until years later do you start to realize how good he was. For example, he said to me one day, we got to meet with the major. This was before I was selected for the undercover job. It was after our first meeting. And the major was the number 2 guy in the state police, and he had to give the okay. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, we're going to meet him at 11:30. Make sure you're down in division headquarters early. I'm down there by 11. About 10 after 11, he walks over to me. He says, Major's tied up. We're not going to be able to meet him until about 1 o'clock. Let's go. We're going to go grab lunch. He takes me to a bar. We go into the bar, and he says to me, what do you want to do, kid? Eat it or drink it? I said, whatever you do, boss. And he said, let's go to the bar. We go to the bar. We have a couple of beers, buy a sandwich. We split it. We go back, meet with the major. In the meeting, the major said to me, the only reservation I really have is that your father is a lieutenant, and the state police is going to look like we had favoritism here. Mm-hmm. And I said, all due respect, boss, if that's the reason, then maybe I need to go to a different outfit, because I'm not asking for favors because of my old man, but I'm also don't want to be held back from things. It wasn't until years later that I found out that meeting was always for 1 o'clock. He set me up to bring me, to put me a couple drinks into me to see how I was going to react in front of the major.
Nice.
It was a test.
Yeah.
And so, but it was also later I heard from the two of them, the major and Lieutenant Liddy, when you spoke up, we at least knew you spoke up. And so you weren't going to sit back and just listen to a major say, you can't have this job because you're your old man.
Right.
Those are all kinds of things that are being tested that just have to be natural. They can't be forced. You guys know when you're doing undercover, it's all got to be natural. Once you start trying to act, you're losing it.
Yeah, you're done. You're done.
It's
all about
impressive. It's
ingratiation.
impressive that they had the forethought to think that out,
Yes.
knowing that you were going to be in a scenario where you might have a couple of beers
Right,
and
exactly.
someone might interrogate you. And they had enough forethought prior to any of the training that exists now. You guys, pretty sharp team from the beginning.
It was brilliant.
Yeah, but you think about your careers and when you work for certain bosses or did certain things for case agents, you knew when you had a good case agent, you knew when they had your back. So when we knew, okay, I could work this case for this guy. When you have a guy like Jack Liddy and
Right.
he's got my back no matter what, it gives you the confidence to do your operational work
Right.
a lot better. Right?
Yeah,
You
think
feel
how many
safer.
bosses you had that said, ask this question.
Yeah.
I can't ask that
Yeah.
question.
Oh, yeah, it's
Right.
great.
They-
Go ask him about the 3 bodies and where they buried them. Let me go in.
Where's
That's-
Jimmy Hoffa?
Yeah.
Anybody know?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually have people say that to me.
Yeah.
Like, can you find out where Hoffa? Like, what
Yeah.
the? How am I bringing Hoffa's name up?
Right. It looks a little fishy, though.
A little bit.
You had to break away from the trooper mentality, right?
Right.
So now when they ask you to do this and you signed on with Liddy and you committed to this role, can you talk about real quick about what was your breakaway from the police?
It's interesting is they wanted to make it so that other troopers would not want to know anything about me, and it probably put up a red flag like crazy because there's a personnel order that comes out every day in the state police, and there's multiple of different things that are taking place. Mine came out saying that I resigned from the New Jersey State Police on April 9th, 1975. And while it was an official piece of paper, there was another one that was put into the colonel's safe and another one that was put into the FBI director's safe saying that preceding personnel order is a ruse just to push him away from the state police. And a side note, really interesting, like the Former Troopers Association is a powerful organization and a tight-knit group. I got a call from one of the people that work in the office asked, can you tell us about your career? Where you were stationed, because there's only shows like you were at graduate from the academy. I said, well, I was in the Troop B as a uniformed trooper, 3 different stations, and then I went undercover, and then I was in the Organized Crime Bureau, the Intelligence Bureau, and I went on with my career, and I ended up at the academy. And she was like, how could you do all that? It only shows you here a year and a half. Those records were never corrected.
They never got rid of it.
They
still showed it. And I was wondering, if my pension, do I need...
No kidding, is your pension in jeopardy?
They owe me more money?
Yeah.
Right.
Old school stuff, doing it by hand doesn't work.
No. So now you dirtied up. You left everybody thinks that you left the job. Right.
And then you're at your
generation.
own funeral.
Yeah.
Everybody, troopers, like most organizations, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Kid got jammed up.
Yeah.
His old man's on the job. They're trying to protect him. They're pushing him away.
Right.
And so it kind of accomplished what it was, because if they thought I was like something wrong with me, some people would not cover. One guy, Bobby Scott, was a guy that I rode with, was a partner in Somerville and in Flemington. And he kept calling. He kept calling me. And my father said to me, you better talk to him because he's too good a cop. He's going to keep searching out.
He's not going to let it go.
He ended up being one of the top homicide detectives in the state police. Worked the Phil LaMonica case when Trooper Phil LaMonica that was killed on Route 80. And Bobby, I got on the phone with him one day at my father's house, and he says to me, I don't know what's going on, but I noticed something wrong, and I just want you to know my wife and I have decided that if you need money, I have $4,000 in my savings account. We want to give it to you. You want to talk about choking up on the other end, knowing that this guy is willing to do this. And also, if it gets found out and I was really jammed up, he's going to have a problem with the state police.
Right.
And $4,000 in that time frame, that's their life savings.
Yeah.
And they're willing to give it to you. It was my first test in lying to someone and pushing them away. And fast forward to when I surfaced, he was at the command post the day of the final raid, and he looked at me and said, I don't know whether to hug you or punch you.
Right.
Yeah. He never knew that whole time, huh?
Right.
Yeah. It's an emotional roller coaster.
What about your family? What do you tell your wife? Like, we're going to tell everybody I don't work
I was
for the state
single at the
police?
time.
Okay,
and that was
cool.
one of the
Okay.
other things. Everybody was single
good
that was
candidate.
involved in this. And that's also something that I brought to undercover school. The assumption was, oh, you're single, you don't have a family. Oh, no, wait a minute. Single people have families.
That's right.
And but that was the mindset back then.
Right.
And so I brought my grandparents together one night at my mother's house to let them know that what they're hearing is not true. And I'm glad I did it. It caused for my grandparents to burn down a couple churches in Patterson with all the candles they were lighting. But what I wanted to do was let them know, and I'm glad it did, because my mom's mom, my grandmother on my mother's side, passed during that time, and I'm happy. I don't know how I would live with her thinking that her grandson went bad and never knowing the truth.
Yeah.
Still want to have some pride.
Yeah, and we were told back then it was a 6-month job. Every grant was written, federal grant was written for 6 months. So, all true honesty, it was kind of selfish on my part. I figured this will be fun for 6 months.
Right.
I'll probably get a detective's badge out of it.
Yeah.
I'll move into a different. There was a lot, and then 6 months went to a year. Then a year went to 2. Then 2 goes to 3, and you're like, just get me the hell out of this
familiar.
thing.
Yeah,
I'm
tired
done.
of it.
I'm done. Can't do it anymore.
So you leave everything behind. And my point to asking about that mindset of your academy was the regimented, the polished look, all that has to go right out the window.
Right.
Everything that your mom and dad raised you to be, you now had to be deterred that they hated. Right. Which is, and we'll get into it later on, the cost of that. But now you dirty up. You go and get some curlers, put some curlers in your hair. You grow a beard. You get that trucker look going to you. And then the unit, Jack Liddy and his unit, they decide that they're going to use an informant, right, with you.
We got lucky in that. It came upon us. We weren't as in tune to it. The state police had cases on this guy, and the FBI had cases on him. And his name was Patrick John Kelly. And Pat was a concierge for the DiNorzio crew, the Bruno crime family. And Tommy DiNorzio, Jackie DiNorzio were both in prison, so Pat had the right to be out front and represent them, which gave him more status. And he chose to come to work for us. And he was the one that sat us down and really schooled us in a way to wise guy.
Yeah.
He was like, I don't know what you're doing with 5 guys being owned in this trucking company.
What do you mean he came to work for you? Like he presented himself as like offering up information to
Well, he
an
became a
agency?
foreman.
Okay.
And so
based on the cases he had.
Yeah.
He worked out a deal. I'll work for you
Cooperating with
guys.
us,
Okay, yeah. He's a CI.
Yeah,
Okay.
he became a confidential informant.
All right.
And when he came to work for us, he was like, what are you guys doing with 5 co-owners of a trucking company? I never saw a bus going down the street with 5 bus drivers. Somebody's got to be in charge here.
Yeah.
And so it was deemed that I would become the president of a new trucking company. The other trooper would take on the role of my driver bodyguard. The FBI agents would actually be involved with the trucking operation. We mimicked a crew as if I was in charge.
Yeah.
And we mimicked the reality of a trucking company. What are we really doing here, rather than just like a fly-by-night kind of company? And Pat was able to walk us in and get us connected. And we had 2 new partners, the Genovese and Bruno crime families.
Yeah.
And so we were kicking back 25% of our profits, 12.5 to the Genovese, which was Tino Fiamara and Johnny DiGilio. And then the Brunos were the DiNorzio family on that side of the fence. So when you start doing that, all of a sudden the doors started open. Our trucks were making more runs down on the port. People wanted to come. We would have, like, at one point, almost 20 trucks running for us. That didn't mean we owned all 20.
Right.
We got contractors that come in. But people wanted to be flying under our flag because they knew their loads weren't going to get hit.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, so you guys are paying up to the 2 families, and you said 25%.
Right.
What's the exchange? Like, what are they doing for you guys?
Making sure we're getting more work on the port.
Okay,
They're
so
opening
otherwise
up
you're sitting
doors.
around waiting on a load to go
They're
somewhere.
driving new contracts. They're bringing
They
you.
had the unions in their pocket.
Okay.
So when the truck showed up, the union guys knew they better get those trucks loaded quick. Our trucks are making more runs than anybody else's runs down on the port because we're connected. Also, the bulletin goes out. You don't touch these trucks.
So at the beginning, it's not really there's not a whole lot of criminal stuff other than it's a little help to just get legitimate loads. You're not stealing stuff. You're not doing anything. You're just paying 25%.
Prior to that, we were.
To help us find
In the
loads.
smaller trucking company, we did loads. We did stolen loads, and we did that to show that we were willing. But we did reverse, right? We'd buy stuff at cheap and make like we stole it and
Right,
sell it
okay,
to
yep.
people, the reverse.
Yep.
And that was all taking place. So it was at least that they knew that this company was willing to go outside the lines.
Right.
They're approachable.
You'd
Yes.
already demonstrated some
Yes.
criminal willingness.
But then it got to the point that every Friday night somebody's coming with somebody,
Yeah.
and every Monday morning something's coming, and it's like you had to figure out how do we tamp this down, and that was a good way of G, what you said, all of a sudden it's like we started playing the role of, we don't want to bring the attention.
Right.
This company, we're all eating off this pie. Don't bring the attention to this thing. We don't want any bad stuff here.
Yeah.
We don't want the stolen stuff in this yard. Hey, we'll put it someplace else, or we'll put you together with somebody.
But
Coming
I
up
think
with
it's-
stories.
Yeah.
And you have to understand at this time, and Bobby, he's being a little humble about it. D'Norcio, Mr. George, Tino Fumara, and John DiGilio, they controlled that whole area for these families.
Right.
They were some of the most powerful people. They weren't just fly-by-night gangsters. I mean, he and Kelly together drew in the great whites that were swimming in the oceans around there. I mean, you couldn't ask for a worse partnership because he had to control these animals. And they controlled, when I say they controlled everything, Tino Fumara and to paint the picture, and John DiGilio fought each other over the docks and over the ports that he was now infiltrating.
Okay.
So now to have the two of them, the dynamic is just explosive. Like, you dangling, you're ringing the bell, and then you have just wolves come running. I mean, and they're picking at you. And next thing you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, the people that they're sending you, like he said, I can only imagine sitting there in the office and having somebody knock at your door. Hey, Mr. George sent me, or Tino sent me, or so-and-so.
They're getting 25%. They're sending you everybody.
Yeah. And when you have Pat Kelly sitting there, you can't just turn around and go, yeah, no, we're closed right now. Come back tomorrow. No. I mean, dude, they find out you're capable and you're a capable company and you'll work contracts and you'll do different loads for them. You're done. They'll latch onto you and suck you dry in a New York second. They're the most vicious people. And the murder and mayhem. Let's not forget how
it's their
did you
calling
know
card.
these guys? Did you know going in John's violent background,
Yes.
Tino's violent background?
Yeah.
So these
You
guys
knew
were
they
shot
were all
callers.
capable.
Right. They all had crews. They were capable guys themselves, but they were ordering murders. And back then in 1970s, they were ordering murders like it was coffee. Like it was easier.
Yeah.
No, this guy gave me a hard time. Just go down and shoot him. Kill all 5 of them and just take the company. That's the mindset he was walking into, to paint that picture.
Tino was ruthless. Tino, I always say, was like he had shark eyes. I mean, when you were in his presence, you knew this guy would look right through you. He a bad man. DiGilio the same way. John, these were guys that they had such control. When they walked in a room, you could sense people just braced, and whatever they wanted, whatever they were going to say was going to take place. And we were told that, John sent you. John, send hellos to John. Send hellos to George. George was Tino's name, in their lingo. If you're George or double George, you're good. Tom is bad. And so they had, you had to learn that whole language. You had to learn that whole subculture, which you guys are very
Is Pat Kelly teaching you this kind of stuff along the way too?
Yeah, you become aware of it, and you get a doctorate in organized crime,
Right.
From all sides,
Right.
and you're playing a role that you really are not in control of. Every decision you make, you got to find out enough. So, just to give you a better understanding, the trucking company is in the shadows of the Statue of Liberty that we start. It's on Communipaw Avenue in Jersey City, and you have to go past. Back then, there was nothing down there. It was just the swamps. And it was a one-way in and one-way out. If you go there today, there's 2 ways out. There's a big science building and all kinds of things along the waterways. Nothing was there back then. Pat Kelly was a well-to-do guy. He did well. But he did it all with white-collar crime. Okay. And he was a brilliant guy, and that's what they loved about him.
Right.
He could move money. He could steal a bank without the bank knowing it. No guns. And he had a horse farm. Well, he lost everything when he became an informant, and he was losing things. He was getting hurt. But he loved to ride horses. So we decide that 2 of the horses will come. He's got to get rid of the other horses. 2 of the horses, we take a trailer in our yard, we cut it in half, we make it the stalls. We're the only trucking company in Jersey City, New Jersey's got horses in the yard with the trucks. And you got the hay in there. And Pat would ride every day.
We just riding around the port on a horse.
Well, you go down to the river, and that's how we would change out the Niagara. The old Niagara.
The recordings.
Recording. Pat liked to ride Western, so he had the saddlebags, and he had it. I had to learn how to ride a horse.
Oh my God!
And I would ride down with them, trade out
You're getting all kinds of education.
But it became a big deal because I always tell people wise guys are not much different than other people. On a Saturday, the wise want to be let them do what they do. The kids would come with the fathers down to the trucking company and we'd have one of the guys walking them around on the horses in the trucking yard while the fathers are upstairs talking, and everything's wired. So we made it as comfortable as we can for the wise guys to hang out in our place. I had a beef every once in a while because the phone bill would be astronomical. You get like a $2,000 phone bill back in the 70s.
Yeah.
They were calling all over. They would come there and make phone calls, but it was great intelligence. We knew who was talking to who was talking to guys in the prison.
They figured your phone was clean, so they're making all their dirty calls on your phone.
Exactly. And Jackie DiNorzio was in prison. He was at Rollway State Prison. He had a phone inside of his prison his cell that he could make calls during the midnight hours. And so the phones, everything was being third-party billed to us. Right. So the intelligence and the connection of plus you're picking up, okay, they got to have some dirty correction officers in there that are letting this guy do this. So you start making cases all along. Yeah.
So horses ended up becoming almost like an ingratiation. It was just going to be there so he could be content, but it turned out there was a lot of use for him.
Yeah.
And a Nagra, just so all the listeners and people watching everything, it's a recording device. It's used to capture all the evidence. Those things were about that big?
Yeah, we thought we were 007s back then, right?
They actually had reel to
reel, and that's what you wanted because they had wands that they would look for RF transmissions being transmitted off your body.
Interesting.
And so you'd walk into a meeting and get wanded, or at dinner somebody would wand you. I don't even know if the wand worked,
right?
Because everybody's like just trying to make sure everybody's.
You just have them taped on your body?
I would wear it where you would wear a cup. So if you're playing sports, I would put it inside the jock, pull it up underneath, and then have on-off switches in my pockets, and I had microphones underneath my armpits because they're going to rub your belly and they're going to rub your back.
Okay, yep.
And they get hot. You're putting on a little weight.
They did
heat up. Gets hot.
Yeah, but not as bad as the RF transmitter, but it would get hot, and that was a device that was reel to reel. And so I did over 300 recordings like that with on-body recordings.
The pressure of, and not to go too down a rabbit hole, but the pressure of reel to reel, the reel ends, you need to switch it out. You need to start it over.
You had to know you had 2.5 hours on that thing.
Yep.
And if you went longer, that thing's going to just run.
Yeah, the sands
and then you had to worry about it clicking.
Clicking, yep.
Yeah. So there were all these kinds of things that you had to have in your head at all times. And you had to say where you were going before you walked into the joint, and so that it was on the recording device. Great memories.
Now the battle of once you get situated, and these guys are coming to the facility, they're coming to the trucking company, you're starting to ingratiate yourself. It's all on the back of Pat Kelly, so he's making a lot of things happen for you. At some point, Pat Kelly's has to start feeling like he's the guy that's actually the president of this, and he's feeling good again.
Oh yeah, you know how an informant is.
And again, I say that because that's how sources are.
Yeah,
we're the bosses, but when you have a guy like Pat Kelly who has that history, and you're a young guy at the time, a 3-year seasoned trooper, who doesn't know the knowledge of the street like Kelly does. Right. Kelly quickly, and again, we've all had those sources where, just do what I say, kid. I'll set it up for you, and he feels empowered to become the boss of the whole thing.
100%.
While you're the one you want to have the dirty conversations with, is Pat getting out of the way, or is he inserting himself where he's making it difficult
Pat
for
wore
you?
a wire.
He did.
Pat wore a wire and was very willing to wear a wire.
But he brought you into the conversations.
Would bring me in the conversation. Pat was as good an informant as anyone could have. But to your point, also, there came many times that he thought he was running a show, and he was making the decisions, and we had to set him straight. And it was one time he and I got into an argument, and I threw a chair, and it was more of an act to let him know, but it was also it was an innuendo that he had the upper hand. I said, if they know who I am, they're going to know who you are. So we're in this together, man. And that was early on. We developed a strong relationship. But you always had to remind yourself, you can't turn a
Right.
a lion into a house pet.
Right.
And so you got to make sure that you're always aware of what this guy may be capable of.
Yeah. If you let them have too much rope, they'll ruin the case.
they'll
They
take
get
it.
you hurt.
They'll get you hurt.
Yep. Did he end up ultimately having charges and stuff drop? Maybe move into a paid informant role or anything like that, or
Yeah, well, he was taken care of. We had an apartment that he and I shared.
You shared an apartment with an informant?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And the whole place was wired.
Yeah, but
it was
still,
in-
that's uncomfortable.
yeah, oh, it's extremely.
Now you moved into the city of Bayonne, right?
Bayonne. My first undercover apartment was in Bayonne. I was between First and Broadway on 22nd, 22nd Avenue, and then they upgraded me to about a year and a half after that. They made me look like I had more money, and so I was driving a Lincoln Mark V back then, which was hot, and then got a Corvette, and I was living at the base of the statue at the George Washington Bridge.
Okay.
So it went up into Fort Lee, New Jersey.
Right.
And we were spread all over. Like we was going all the way down to Philly because of Bruno's people, all the way up to New England, kind of thing.
Okay.
And in
You're
Canada.
trucking.
You're a young guy with a Corvette.
Yeah.
You're single. You're living a mafia lifestyle in a beautiful place. Like, that's pretty fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there days off? Is there time to socialize? Or some drinking and partying?
Well, everybody's
and
trying
hanging
to
out?
set me up because they think I'm single, and everybody's trying to set me up with a cousin or some girl. And I always had a line.
Good
that,
point. The mob guys even, right?
Yeah, I said I don't play. I got this girl over in New York, and I don't play. And it wasn't like it is today, where everybody could find out everything about each other. So you could push things away. And if I was the golden goose, and I think with the money, they were like not going to push too far. You were in a lot of social settings. I mean, like Joey Adonis was a guy that I liked. Joey A was a guy that was just a good knockaround guy. But he was a character. So Tino, Michael Coppola, Joey Adonis, Pat, myself, we're in this restaurant in Fort Lee. And Joey gives the guy a bunch of quarters and tells him to play A6. And it was the theme from the Godfather movie. And that played while we walked in to sit down. So everybody got put on notice in the restaurant that the wise guys are here. And so, life imitates art. It was kind of comical to see those things.
Right.
But they had great senses, a lot of good senses of humor. I mean, there were some funny guys. Their humor is a little different, but it was some funny guys.
Probably pretty dark humor at times.
Yeah, a lot.
So they see
dark.
your progression. They see you moving into Fort Lee. They see you driving a Corvette. So it's obvious you're making money with this company that they're pushing work towards.
Right.
At what point do these low-hanging fruit and these knockaround guys, we call them in the street, the low-level guys, when does it turn into a conversation with Fumara and DiGilio that, listen, this is what we expect now? Did that take place?
Yeah. So Tino, once they start seeing how successful the business was, and you notice so well, they can't help themselves, man. They got to take the whole thing. They can't just let it sit there and be the 25% of bigger profits. Now, so then it became Tino didn't want to be with Johnny anymore.
Yeah.
Tino didn't want DiGilio getting a piece, and so Tino came to me and said, we're going to move out of here. We're going to, and I wanted down neck. He wanted it down neck north because that's his. And so he said, we're going to start a new trucking company, but we're going to start first with a tire company. You're just going to fix tires. And I said, well, what do we need? And start going through the whole thing. And he said, you don't need anything. You need an office. He says, my guys will take care of it. He said, they can either get their tires fixed with a billing that has no work being done.
Right.
Or they'll have 10 tires there's something wrong with them.
Right.
So that was the way that we started this next company that started to come about.
So they start a company where it's like, if your trucks don't want to have cut tires, you're going to pay us to fix tires flat enough.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It was a tire truck business. It was a business that would create the first step in starting this new trucking company that he said to us, you'll just let that other one fade out. We go into this business. Then off of that, we'll springboard and we'll start an even bigger trucking company. But it would all be under his flag.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and it's a great business proposal. But the problem is, this is in corporate America, right? So that's a guy, Tino Fumara made you that offer. I made you an offer. Like, it's that you can't say no. But
Oh,
now,
yeah, this wasn't a negotiation.
how
There's
do
no
I tell? No,
negotiation.
there's no negotiation. But how do you tell Giglio, who's
Yeah.
an absolute lunatic,
Right.
who's a former boxer? Paint the picture. He runs all the docks on the Jersey City side, Bayonne,
Which is where
Namakti.
you're at currently with
Right.
Alpha.
Exactly. And we're with Giglio then.
Okay.
So it's being split between Tino Fiumara and Giglio. But they're only splitting 12.5%. 12.5% is going down to like Angelo Bruno's
Right.
group. And Johnny Key Simone is representing that, and he's out of Staten Island. So you had all these geographic areas right around each other, and they're all clawing at it and saying, and from our standpoint, we want to entertain as much as we can. And I know, like, I got the golden pass.
Yeah.
Right.
If this gets too bad, I'm out. Imagine a legitimate business person.
Right.
They don't have that.
They don't.
Yeah,
have
they
that
can't
yet.
get
They
out,
don't know
right.
where they're going. They
Right.
don't have any out. And so I know that I got the cavalry coming over the mountain, hopefully in time.
Right.
But somebody else living through this?
No.
I mean, I can't even imagine, because I went through, the physical ailments of, we're all good at doing something. We're all good at doing undercover work here, sitting here.
Right.
I do the kiss on the cheek and hang out, but I get 2 miles down the street. I'd pull over and throw my guts up.
Yeah.
Find the first gas
Yeah.
station I could find because I had diarrhea. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my bed was soaking wet. It was all that fear. So you become good at repressing normal reactions to fear, yet that's still inside.
It's going to hit you sooner or later.
At some point.
Right.
Yeah. And yet we did it over and over.
And you
and
made a
over.
good point there. Keeping in mind, there's a hardworking trucking company, probably barely getting by,
Right.
and now they're saying if you don't pay us, we're going to cut all your tires.
Yeah.
And they can't say no to them.
Right.
So you kind of set the tone there to realize these guys are definitely, they're not just businessmen, they're violent men, right? With a lot of enough clout to terrify a bunch of truckers who are not soft men, right? They don't lay down easily.
No.
So here you are, now you're setting up a tire business.
Yeah, and you're hanging out in places that you get to know more about what's going on. So we were going to the Bella Vita restaurant up in Parsippany, New Jersey, which was his main hangout. And Louis Crescenzi was the guy that owned it. This is a guy that started off with gas stations, hardworking guy, always had a dream of having and he had this amazing restaurant. He was like a tuxedo guy meeting you at the door. It was an amazing facility, a restaurant to go to. And he makes the mistake. He says to me one day, and I'm just having lunch with him, one businessman to another. He said, I'm having a problem with a guy who's trying to hit me for money. He said, I went to Jerry Coppola. And I'm looking at him across the thing, and I'm saying, you just made a bad mistake, man. Yeah. Jerry Coppola is Michael Coppola's uncle, part of Tino's crew. And Jerry brings the beef to Tino and Michael Coppola. They take care of it with a guy in New York who was claiming that he was owed money by Crescenzi. And Louis says to me one day, Tino, Mr. George took care of that problem I told you about. And I said, good, you all right? He said, yeah, I'm fine. He said, I'm thinking of offering him a few $100s. And I'm thinking to myself, you have no idea.
Yeah.
It ended up, fast forward that story over about a year worth of them just taking over that business. One night we're in the restaurant. He hands his keys to Larry Ricky and says, you close it up. He gave up. He walked away. And Larry Ricky ended up in the trunk of a car at the Huck Finn Diner in Somerville, New Jersey. And he was one of Tino's guys. And strong indication that Tino or Michael Coppola were the ones that put him there. But these were the kinds of folks that you were around. Yeah. These were the kinds of people that you spent time with. And I tell people you get a lot of 2-for-1 meals because when you're eating, it's going up and it's coming down. It's going up and it's coming down. You're trying to keep your food down. The tension at all times is extremely high because you guys know this feeling. You think you got cop written on your forehead until you get in it. And then when you get in, you get too comfortable.
Yep.
And that's where I became more nervous is that I was too comfortable.
You're hanging out, you're having a good time, you're drinking, you're powerful, and then you're driving home and you realize, and like you said, you're throwing up, you got a stomach ache, you can't sleep, you're sweating. It's not all fun and games. It's not all fun to party and hang out and drive Corvettes and live in nice condos.
Well, I had your book, and I said it sat on my nightstand. And nights that I was operational, those are the nuggets I would pull out of your book. I didn't have the proper training at that point in my career, but reading your stories and reflecting on that and you pulling over, I realized what my body was experiencing. I was able to say, oh, okay, wait a minute. So And I'm saying you didn't have that. You didn't have another guy's experience to say, oh, this is normal. These emotions that you were going through at the time, Bob, like at least I had Bob Delaney's story to say, oh, wait a minute, it's okay that I wanted to throw up. It's all right that I wanted to pass out, you know? But again, it's rinse and repeat. Like, I got to go back into this again tomorrow.
Right.
That's long-term undercover work. And people don't realize undercover work is fun, but usually they're one-hit wonders. You go in, you buy a little bit. Maybe you'll set another meeting up. You buy a half a kilo, and then, hey, I'll be back for the other half tomorrow. This is long-term. This is rinse and repeat.
Right.
This is pull yourself over on the side of the road. You just vomit all over the place, emotions and your contents of your stomach, right? And then get ready to do it all again tomorrow. You don't know what's coming at you.
Did you have somebody to talk to? Did you meet somebody on the case at all?
One of the things that I think were
some things.
Yeah, good point. One of the things that I think we were fortunate is that we had each other, right? That meaning the other FBI, because what I described early on of us we became very close, and you came to not look at yourself as the state police or the FBI. We came to look at ourselves as this group, and that's what you start to see and understand that Joint Task Force do today, right? They kind of like we know loyalty, and it's the outfit that I'm a part of, but I'm with this group, and we need each other, and so you had each other to kind of speak to. Where I was more playing the quarterback, and so I was in the action more. Not to say that minimized of what they did, but I didn't tell even them some of the feelings I had because I felt like,
got to carry that
am
weight.
I tough enough to do this? I don't want them to think
Will
I'm
they pull
weak.
me out?
I don't think
They
that there's something wrong with me. And those were the kinds of emotions that were difficult for me to be able to process because I was even embarrassed to say or ashamed to say some of the things. And then when the job was over, people are putting you on a pedestal and they're giving you awards and they're talking about you in heroic ways. And it was like you felt like the biggest hypocrite in the world because you're saying things about me that aren't true, man. It's like I'm not that guy.
Right.
I'm just a regular guy that got put into a job. And and you come to understand it took me a long time to understand this, but courage is not absent of fear.
Right.
No.
Courage takes place
said.
despite the fear that you feel.
Yeah.
And that's the difference of being able to take a look at yourself and say, that was despite the fear. Right. But as you're in it, I was getting palpitations to the heart. I was getting all these kinds of things. And, they sent me to a doctor that Lieutenant Liddy knew. And he said to me, are you under a lot of stress? And I'm like, I can't tell you anything, man. I can't tell you. It's like, just give me a pill to make me feel better or give me something. Right. And all those kinds of things, I think, take place in every undercover operative's world.
Without a doubt.
What do you think was more powerful fear? Like people have said to me a lot, were you afraid you're going to die? And I was like, no, I mean, I had already accepted that. I was more afraid I would fail. That anxiety of like, there's the moment of like, that you're in a dangerous place, but when you get out of that, you're like, did I mess it up? Is this thing over? Yeah. There's a lot of anxiety with carrying all that weight. You know what I mean?
It is.
We were fortunate. Liddy kept us, like I didn't realize all the pressure that was coming because this was $1 million operation in 1970.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what that translates to today. But the pressure that was coming to him of what are we getting? What is taking place? He never transferred that over to us. And he kept us light, which was the reason that it was successful. Yeah. Because if you would have put that much more pressure on us to say, we making cases, we doing this. So the kind of questions that came late in the investigation. So at about the 2.5-year mark, they started bringing more people in to let them know because we're figuring we're going to end this thing. And the more people came in, the more I got nervous because now it's more people know. And if they start talking at cocktail parties, the attorneys, the deputy attorney generals or the USAs that are assigned to these cases, now you're getting more and more people knowing about it. When it was small and close, you felt, okay, we got a shot here. But when that thing starts going out, man, you start getting real nervous.
Yeah, you knew your story and you knew your close people's story, but the more people that know it, it's harder to keep it in place.
Yeah, you're trying to impress somebody at a cocktail party saying, oh, you should hear about this undercover job we've had going for 3 years in New Jersey. And those were the kinds of things that would be in the back of your head.
And when we're coming back to the station house, we're coming back to our law enforcement meetings, you you see that happening.
Yes.
You see a lot of these lawyers, the case agents, they're all high-fiving each other.
Right.
Oh my God, we got this guy. We locked him in. We locked this guy. Oh, he's done. He's finished. Stick a fork in him. He's done. And the things they're saying, or they're putting these impressions in your brain, you know, like you said, that feeling of doubt. Like if you're sitting here high-fiving each other like this, patting each other on the back, what are you doing outside when you leave here? Who are you telling?
Right.
You're telling your wife, you're telling somebody else, and these neighborhoods are close-knit. But you have to come back in now. And again, it's often what I wrote about in the book, the traumatic emotional damage it does to you, because you now have to go, Pat Kelly's life is over after this.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You now have a kinship and a friendship with him, and you kept each other alive for so long, but you're going to cut the cord with him, and he's going to go back to being, what, a zero, have nothing left, right? What's going to happen to him? People don't realize all the mental anguish that's put on us as operatives.
Yeah.
And, you know, the families, not the bad guys, the families that you met along the way, the Christmas parties you went to, the girlfriends you were introduced to. Like, you know it's going to have a tremendous impact on these people. Did that affect you?
Yeah, every time you met somebody, you knew how it was going to end for them, right? Once you started, you're looking at them, you go, this is not going to end well for you.
Right.
And then, you know, not with everybody. I mean, the bad guys are the bad guys.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like you start breaking it down into, there's good guys, there's bad guys, and then there's evil.
Oh,
the
yeah.
evil are the ones that have to be eliminated, and they're the ones that need to be taken. The bad guys, sometimes you'll start going, not that bad a guy. You know, he's putting bread on the table for his kids. He's doing this, he's doing that. One guy I knew, Freddie, they called him Freddie Cuckoo, Freddie Agnello. Everything he did was about bringing money in for his kid, that the day that kid put a spoon into the cereal and brought it to his own mouth would be like he won the Olympic medal.
Yeah.
Kid had emotional and psychological and physical. I woke up that Christmas after we put his father away for 8 years, wondering who's taking care of this kid. You know, your empathy levels are high, because you know it's more than just the bad guy.
Yeah.
And then you have to be reminded that that's a decision they made. They put their family there. You didn't do that. And it has to be reminded. But your first instinct is, I hurt this kid.
Yeah.
And so finding that balance and finding the reality of where you are emotionally is just something that I think is extremely important. And it's an area that was never talked about. As you said, the training was minimal.
Right.
And to understand the psychology, you know, if we had somebody that became another person, we call it schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And we would get help. When we put people into these positions to do this kind of work, and to me, it's the best investigative tool that we have, because it's not filtered information.
Right.
An informant's going to tell you
Firsthand.
what they want you to know.
Yeah.
Here you got somebody on our side of the fence inside, but we have to be able to take care of them and understand the emotional impact it can have. Doesn't mean it's going to happen to everybody in the same way.
Right.
But understanding that we've got to give them the tools.
There's a lot of guilt when
Yes.
the case ends, and and the impact is so wide. You know, one man goes to prison. There's no way his family's going to make that kind of money and survive. Like you said, there's a lot of guilt for the undercover to take that on and know literally you've taken that person's life. You know, you didn't kill them, but their life's over. It's powerful.
And when it was amazing, we were in the pool, and we were at the undercover apartment, and I said to Pat, it was during the summer, we went down to the pool, and I knew I had to tell him this thing's ending in a couple of weeks. And sitting in that water on the edge of the pool and telling him, I could see the transformation. He went from what you said earlier of being in total control to he was like going into a world he had no idea of. We're going into relocation. You're going to meet with the federal agents. We're going to figure out a way. Who's the family? And Pat was a complicated guy, which most informants are complicated people. Who you taking on relocation with you?
Right.
You know, he had multiple women besides his wife that we had to figure out, what are we doing here? And who's going to know and who's not going to know? And if they're left behind, what kind of
Right.
danger are they in?
Right.
And you're planting that seed while you're operational
Yes.
with this guy. You know, he doesn't have the tools to withstand that.
But he also doesn't believe that day's ever coming, right?
He doesn't want it to come.
He
So he's
doesn't
gonna
want it
do-
to come.
he'll do everything he can to stop it.
And he went into that.
Yeah.
He went into that big, oh no, we can do this.
Yeah.
We can get this guy. We
can
can
get
get
more
this guy.
horses.
I can get this guy. I can get
It's common for the
I'll get
undercover
more-
to do that.
Yeah.
I've seen undercovers do the same thing. No, I got one more. I can do one more. We can keep this going, you know?
Yes.
Because just like it ends for that informant, he has to go back to real life. Much like this for you, you're a New Jersey State Trooper, been living undercover, driving Corvettes under the Statue of Liberty.
Right.
What's life look for you in this case ends? You're not going to work undercover no more, right?
I got assigned to the Organized Crime Bureau in Central New Jersey. So that was out of the middle of the state. So it was always north, central, and south. And I'm not welcomed with open arms.
I'm sure not.
Right? Because the lieutenant that's in charge there is going, okay, you got assigned to me, but you're going to be in trials for the night. I got no productivity. I got 12 guys on my squad, and I just went to 11. And now the bosses downtown are calling up and saying, make sure he's got a good ride.
Yeah.
The senior guy has to give up his car, and I'm just assuming that's what he's supposed to do because I'm the spoiled brat that's been the star of the show.
Yeah.
Well, the other troopers are like, who the frick is this kid coming in
quit.
here?
I thought he
What the
quit.
hell? They got to take care of this kid.
Yeah.
Pete Halleck's got to give up his car for this
Right.
kid.
Yeah.
He's put 15 years in here.
Yeah.
And so the rubs start to come
Sure it
that
does.
you're not even aware of, and you're acting like I'm acting like a spoiled kid. Like, I am wearing number 12. I'm used to being the president of the trucking company. I'm used to being well, you're not that anymore. You're Trooper Delaney, pal. No different than anybody else.
Well, it goes full circle how we started this conversation earlier about growing up, being loyal to the community, being part of the community, not being a liar, being faithful and being truthful to your friends. And now you're just seen as somebody, you're a liar.
Yep.
You know, now you think you're a special kid, you think you're this, you think you're that because your father, because of the case you did. It becomes a very, very, like you said, the rub is bad. The rub is really bad. And the readjustment, the reacclimation back to going into law enforcement. Yeah, what's the matter? You miss your friends?
Right.
My friends?
Right.
What are you talking about?
Right.
You're my brothers and sisters in blue. You miss your friends, you miss your gangsters, you miss your pasta, you miss your this. You know, they have a lot of accusations and a lot of finger pointing. So you survive that. But before that, can we talk more about the John Tagilio and Tino Fumaro when you get caught in the middle? Because that's the most dangerous situation for you, right? That's when it actually boiled and came to a head for you and you were threatened at one point?
Yeah, well, not threatened while I was under, threatened after I surfaced. There was innuendo on so as the cases start to unfold, we make cases. It was one of the, if not the first RICO case that took place. The racketeering, influence, corrupt organizations law had just come into fruition, and because there was such a federal and state operation taking place, it was a unique setting. That Carl Lopresti was from the assistant U.S. attorney out of the Newark office, and Mark Malone was the lead from the Attorney General's office of the state of New Jersey. They were cross-deputized in each other's courtrooms so that they could help prosecute, because the complexity of the case was so high that it would have been too hard. And these two guys were with us probably for the last year of the investigation. So they had a good handle on it. And they could send out cases to different, and the decision was made each time, what was the longest exposure for the people. If it was RICO, then they were going to put into the RICO. But if it was a straight up theft job on the port, and it was 8 years on a state case, then they went state. And so 90% of the cases played out. We would have to go in and testify in grand juries, obviously, and do all that. But they would plead out. Some people came on our side of the fence and became informants. So there was a lot of fallout from this. But that whole, one of the things that they did pick up, Company K, which was in Hoboken, was Tino's hangout. There was innuendo about a death threat on me. And I was called to division headquarters, and they played it. And it wasn't the kind of thing that you can go out and make an arrest, but there was enough innuendo to understand what's being said. And so they had state police with me at all times until they got it to where they wanted to get it. And you couldn't do what they did back then, but there were meetings between captains in the state police and capos of the mob, saying this kid better not catch a cold. Meaning, we told him to do this. This is not him being a cowboy out there. And it came back later after having a security team on me for a period of time. There's no sanction hit on this guy, but it was actually said by Jerry DeBoot to one of the captains of the state police, Harold Spenning, there's no sanction hit, but I can't protect him from a cowboy. And that's a powerful statement. Because if somebody goes rogue, even if it's not sanctioned, it still can happen. And it's also really what every cop goes through. somebody comes home from prison, you never know what somebody's going to do. That's part of what this business is, and part of what the public has to understand about the kind of sacrifice that is made by law enforcement officers throughout the world. When you put yourself in these kinds of positions and you're at this high level criminal activity, you never know what's going to take place. And I'm looking here at some of the crime groups that you see up there, and you see the cartels and the Yakuza and the Italian Mafia, the Russian organized crime. There was a sense within traditional organized crime that if you're a straight cop, there's less likelihood something's going to happen to you.
Right.
Not all the time, but it's the cops that were playing both ends to the middle. They called it playing the piano. You're going to play the piano, and you can't be like being our friends and picking up money from us and then turning us in over here. You can't both sides. And so that would be indicated many times on hits, right? You go do a hit and you see dollar bills or $50 bills ripped up and shoved up somebody's rear end. Now you know that this was somebody that was greedy. They were trying to take too much. So there's a lot of messaging that comes through, and you get to understand that in that subculture, and it's a dynamic subculture.
I don't want to skip past that because I think you were making a really good point, and you were basically saying if you work undercover with integrity, at the end of the case, even though there's some pissed off people that might want to hurt you and kill you, and one of them could, if you did it with integrity and you didn't play both sides, you're safer.
Yeah, there were some guys, like Tino would spit on the ground whenever I would testify. He would spit and he'd rub his eyes like I'd gouge your eyes out. He's trying to send messages. But there were other guys that I had conversations with that would say to me, you were straight on the stand. I respect it. You put your bread on the table one way, I put it on another way. You beat me this time. Meaning I had prosecutors and USAs, that assistant U.S. attorneys, that would say, can you tell this part of the story? I said, it has nothing to do with the case. It's you're dirtying them up. I'm not going to dirty them up. I mean, I know about their girlfriends. I know about this. Their wife's sitting in the trial. I'm not going to dirty them up. The kids are there. Let's take what they did criminally. What they did morally, that's on them. I'm not the judge there.
Good for you. Good for you, because it's not. We don't need to bury them completely. No. We're looking for the elements of the crime. Are they there or they're not?
Exactly.
We all know we got skeletons in the closet. There's no sense bringing them up, and that probably does help protect you. It's interesting you brought up in the Mob Museum here all these different organized crime groups, and there's a section called Bringing Down the Mob, and I think maybe some part in this case you met one of the people that's displayed in there, Joe Pistone, is Donnie Brasco.
Yeah, Joe and I crossed paths, but what I was going through difficult times after I surfaced, Joe was still under. Lou Free, who became the 5th director of the FBI, was a street agent. He was handling cases off my case. He was handling cases, Joe's. And Lou put us together. And when we were at Governor's Island in New York City, and when I first met Joe. And when we looked in each other's eyes, and I listened to his words, and I read his body language, I knew he got what I was going through. And to this day, still have conversations with Joe. But when you have somebody that you can actually speak with, even the guys that I was working with weren't experiencing the same thing I was. They were experiencing it at a different level. They weren't meeting with Tino Fiumara. They weren't meeting with Johnny DiGiulio. They weren't going with Johnny Keys. And so... we went down to Joe Sonkin's Gold Coast restaurant in Hollywood, Florida, flew down there. And this is way before all the kind of security that we have on planes. We're wiring up in the bathroom. And of the plane. And getting picked up by wise guys. And in that meeting, I didn't get to meet him, but Russ Buffalino was at one table. Johnny Keys was running between us, paying money back and forth. I mean, so you were amongst all these names, and we were within these groups that you started to have this understanding of this thing it's worldwide. It's not Jersey.
It's multi.
It's worldwide. It's huge. And that's to that point there. When I surfaced from doing the undercover work and then went into the organized crime where you testify, you go through all this stuff, I started to come to a realization we are being narrow-minded. As law enforcement. We are looking at this in one way. And also, we translate their world into our world. So we have a table of organization. And
we think it's this small.
We got the capo up top, and we got all these lines coming down just like we do for us or the military of showing rank. And I said, I never saw anybody say, I'm in drugs and I want to transfer over to loan sharking.
Yeah.
They're going to do whatever they got to do.
Yeah.
And so let's not make this into like they're that militaristic.
Yeah.
They're
Right.
not. And they'll work with anybody.
Yeah.
And so you started seeing the outlaw motorcycle gangs working with the wise guys.
Yep.
So we came up with, when I went to the academy, we started a thing called the Institute on Organized Criminal Groups. It was a two-week training program at Seagirt, New Jersey, and it became worldwide. We had people from the Royal Ulster Constabulary come in. We had people from Ireland that would help us understand what the IRA was doing. Understanding in the early days in the 1980s about where we are today, of all that you have displayed here, of these criminal groups, and to understand at times, if they have to work together, they will figure out a way to work together. And so we have to be a lot more progressive in our thinking instead of being narrow-minded.
Right.
I think that, I mean, I left in 2016, and I think we started to see that transition where you started out looking at a New Jersey organized crime unit, and now it's global. Like just like in a mob museum, this display we're sitting in here, the crime groups literally are working together. The Chinese, the Italians,
Right.
the black gangs, Hispanic gangs, white gangs, everybody's working together, and you do have to have a bigger global picture of it.
Do you think that from the prisons, that starts to even break the walls down even more? Because even though they're segregated in the prisons, there's this movement of saying, I can go over, I've got a contact, I've got a guy.
I got a guy.
Yeah.
And
We create a new network.
Yeah, the operations we did prove that. I mean, it starts in the prisons, and they all got a guy on the outside, without a doubt.
Yep.
And you see the rackets are still the the cultures the rackets might be controlled by a different culture now, but it's all the same. The counterfeiting goods, all the knockoff stuff, and the trades and the swag, and it's all just, the Italians did it during our time, but now a new culture is taking it over. Whether it's Russian, Eurasian, or somebody else, they all got a guy.
Yeah, everybody's got a guy.
Yeah.
I'm an old dude now. I can go undercover at the senior citizen home and figure out who's stealing the yogurt.
Well, at the success of the case and it comes to an end and everybody gets arrested and everything happens, you don't just fade off into the sunset. Bob Delaney takes a job and you become an NBA referee, which is pretty low profile. Nobody's going to see you, right? How did that work out in the beginning?
Yeah, the way it came about, I played at the high school level and college level, basketball and baseball. I was pretty good at baseball early on, and then I tried out in grammar school for the basketball team, and I didn't make it, and that drove me to get better at basketball. And ended up being an all-state player in Jersey, played at New Jersey City University. The only thing that was giving me inner peace, I don't know why, but it was like calling me, get back on a basketball court. And I couldn't play anymore. And so I figured I could start refereeing. And once that kind of security detail was off me and they were more comfortable, I started going back to having a somewhat normal life. And, your head is always on a swivel, but it's like, okay, I'm going to start refereeing. And I started little kids games, 5th and 6th, 7th and 8th, and I worked my way up. And it gave me, I didn't know what it was doing for me like I know about post-traumatic stress now, but the endorphins were being released. My hypervigilance was being placated because I had to look around. And it was feeling like I left a street that had no boundaries and rules, and now I had a game that had rules and boundaries.
Right.
And so all of this was creating a calm inner peace for me. And one thing led to another and led to another, and I started refereeing higher level ball. And then I was working the Jersey Shore Summer Pro League and City College in New York and all over New York and Philadelphia. And Darryl Garrettson was in the stands, and he was the director of officials for the NBA. He was scouting referees.
Really?
Like people scout players. And he said, "You interested in the NBA?" I said, "Never thought about it." He said, "Well, give the CBA a try." And the Continental Basketball Association was the forerunner to what now is called the G League. And so I started refereeing there, did it for 2 years, and I got offered a job in the NBA. And I tell people, when you're going through difficult times, find your inner peace. My inner peace opened a career. And then I became an NBA referee for 25 years. The interesting part, Darryl did not want the NBA to know, not the NBA to know, but didn't want to make it a focus of, this is an undercover cop or a state trooper that became a referee. So the story wasn't really told until Jackie McMullen, who was a sports writer for the Boston Globe, during the Whitey Bulger time frame, knew my story. And I had been an NBA referee about 10 years by that time. And she went to him, she said, I want to tell the story. And she did. And it was on the front page of the Boston Globe. And it was right around the time that Whitey went on a lam.
Yeah.
And so it created all this buzz. And the NBA being the good organization that it is with understanding PR, I was refereeing a game that Sunday afternoon when that paper came out in Boston. And so the notoriety and everything came. And from there, the floodgates opened. Everybody wanted to hear the story.
Yeah.
By then, were you ready for it, though? Because it sounds like you're saying
Yes.
that refereeing had helped heal you. You had enough peace in there where you could, like, become your own person again. And so now you're willing to accept that notoriety.
Dutch, you just said something no one's ever said to me, and I didn't realize it till you said it. I was ready for it then. I wasn't ready for it. And that's the insight that I've been fortunate with great leaders that I've been around. Lieutenant Liddy was a great leader. Darryl Garrettson was a great leader. Darryl Garrettson knew you got to establish yourself as a referee. You can't lean on what you were. You got to become who you are.
Yeah, no one cares what you used to be.
Exactly. Especially when the ball goes up. Like once the ball goes up, nobody cares. Before the games, players are coming over early. Grant Hill came one day and patted me down. He said, "You still wired?" I said, "Yeah, for ABC, but not for any other reason."
As far as the referee goes, you traded in de-escalation and conflict resolution with gangsters and bad guys, but you decided to put yourself in this environment where you're on a hard floor and you're around 7-foot monsters, human beings that, like, you went toe to toe with Shaquille O'Neal.
Yes.
Right? I've seen those pictures, and I've seen you actually with the finger pointing in their face and scolding them like they were little kids. And you had so many interactions, and Kobe, you had some interactions with Kobe as well. If you want to share a story with us.
Yeah. Kobe had this way about him. Anybody that's a fan of the game knows that Kobe had a scowl on his face. He would give it to Phil Jackson if he didn't like what was going on. He'd give it to the referees. He'd give it to his teammates. He'd give it to his opponents. And we had a game in Staples, and right off the opening tip, play goes to the hoop. I forget who they were playing, and Kobe fouls the guy. And I call a foul. I give a signal, 24, and I turn around and I see Kobe walking towards me. And he's got that scowl on his face. And I'm like, he's going to complain about this? I mean, he cracked the guy. And so now he comes up on one side of me and comes around the other and leans down and whispers in my ear, "What was it like wearing a wire with those mob guys?" And so he played me. He brought Uber out, right? He wanted it, but if you listen to the video or the clip of the game, Mike Breen, who's the announcer for ABC, is saying Delaney's getting an earful from Kobe about that call when it was all about the mob. And like I told the story before, Grant Hill came down, patted me down. "Are you wired?" I said, "Yeah, but for ABC." Chris Mullen grew up in New York. His father worked at the airport. All he wanted to talk about were the wise guys. Chris Mullen, and there were so many NBA players that were students of the mob. They loved all the stories. And then if I brought, one day Joe Pistone goes to a game with me, brings his grandson. So I put Joe in the car with the other two referees. These guys were like two little kids in a candy store. They're taking photos. All they know is they're with Donnie Brasco. They're so excited. So the mob showed up in conversations on the basketball floor as well.
And it was an icebreaker, I would imagine. It broke it. It relaxed you.
Karl Malone said to me, "Damn, you're the man on the floor and you're the man off the floor." Mike Schuler was a coach of the Portland Trailblazers. He said there's 3 groups of people you don't mess with: the FBI, the mafia, and NBA referees. And I've been in all 3.
Might throw a New Jersey State Trooper in there too.
That's pretty impressive. But I would imagine it's educational too for those guys. They're high-level pro ball players, and the transition back to normal life is very similar to what we experienced being operational and having to transition back to normal life.
Very much so.
Have you ever thought about working with those guys? Because that's got to be tough.
Very much so. We're doing a lot of work with athletes now of understanding that transition. Transitions in life are extremely important to have an understanding. And I use a saying when I pull on what used to be my state police uniform or a military uniform or an NBA uniform. If you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't.
What aren't you?
And so understand you're more than what that uniform portrays. You're a human being inside that uniform. And you get held on a pedestal and you get a lot of accolades. but at some point that ends.
Yep.
And how are you going to react to when that ends?
Yeah.
That's important. Like you can't let your job be your only identity.
Right.
And especially
it's
undercover,
hard.
because when you walk away from it.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
Being a cop and having that badge in your pocket,
it's pretty powerful. It feels good, man. It feels good.
It's hard to let it go.
But it changes who you are, right? And
Yes.
I always, at least when I speak, I constantly remind recruits and I remind the young men and women in law enforcement, listen, the badge and gun don't identify who you are. Don't ever lose sight of the character of the person, the man or woman you were as the candidate. That's who you want to be at the end of your career. Like who you were during the application phase, that's who they bought into and that's who they invested. You're going to see all this darkness and trauma along the way, but at the end, you have people that love you. Maybe they're still around, the people that held the Bible for you. Those are the people you want to be there. They're expecting to see Bob Delaney, the Giovanni Rocco, or the Dutch that they knew 25, 30 years ago. That's a hard thing to do. It's hard to manage.
It's hard to be that person.
It is.
When I surfaced, everybody wanted me to be that same guy that I was.
Yeah.
And I was different.
Yeah.
And you've changed.
Yeah.
The same thing that I speak with our troops. When they come home from deployment, their families want them to be the exact same person who he or she was before they were deployed.
Right.
And they have been changed.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're bad different. They're just different. And the difference is the experience that they went through.
Yeah, well said. But now when you're refereeing for the NBA and you make it in there, there's got to be something in the back of your mind that says, I'm just waiting for somebody to yell, Bobby Covert, hey this, hey that. And you see where I'm going, right? Your name gets called out one time on a court, right? You're on the court.
Yeah,
somebody...
but to your point, like, Junior from The Sopranos, he was a big Nets fan, so he was sitting under the hoop.
Yeah.
Different guys from The Sopranos would be at the Knicks games.
Right.
And so they knew the background, and it was always like some kind of comment. But I would get a lot of comments from the fans, and it was more in jest of when the story came out, after my book came out, all those kinds of things. But then one day, early on, out on the court in Phoenix, and I hear, Bobby, Bobby, Bobby. And, people yell at you, and you can't go over, and even if you know people, it looks like you're not focused on what you're doing. And I kind of look over at this guy. Now he's yelling out Alamo Transportation. He's yelling out T, and I mean, Tino. And I mean, he's got all, and I'm saying this guy knows more than, and I look over, and he's going, it's Pat. It's Pat.
Oh, Pat Kelly?
It's Pat Kelly.
Yeah.
He's on relocation. It's my blue heaven. Everybody going to Arizona. And so, and I'm like, how is he sitting courtside at an NBA game? And I send the ball boy over to him with a note. I said, I'm staying at the Marriott Mountain Shadows. If you can stop for a drink after the game, I'll meet you there. He's with a woman. At one point, she gets up to go to the ladies' room. I said, does she know? He goes, no. I said, what? She says, I kind of live in common law with her. She has a lot of money and got courtside seats.
He's still hustling.
And right then my mind's going, you're still hustling.
He's still hustling.
It's still, go back to the line I said before, you do not make a lion into a house pet.
No.
It went right back
Were
to
you
it.
kind of slightly impressed? Like,
It was like, it's
sure,
kind
you're
of
sitting
like
courtside.
And then stayed in touch with him, over the years. Would see him if I had games up there. And then I got a call from a referee that said, this woman sent a note to the referee locker room. You have to call her. And I knew who the name was and called. And she said, Pat died. Died of a heart attack. She said, but I was looking in the attic and I came across a box and it had a lot of stuff in there. And I see your name. Is that my Pat? Because Pat's living under a relocation name.
Right.
I said to her, I'll be in Phoenix in a couple of months. We'll talk. She said, you just gave me the answer.
Yeah.
And, for a guy in his position to die of natural causes, that's unusual.
Pretty lucky guy.
Yeah, he led a full life. But it also ramped up a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. But one of the really cool things that came was that his grandchildren reached out to me.
Right.
And his granddaughter said it in a way that I share with the military and law enforcement. She said, thank you for giving us the story because we always knew there was a story, but no one would talk about it. And I want to tell you what Pat's 10 grandchildren are doing. One is in law enforcement, one's in real estate, one has a restaurant, all good citizens.
Wow.
And she said, but I want you to understand the work that you do. The work that you did, you probably understand the lives you saved. but I want you to understand about the lives you created. And that's what cops do.
Yeah.
And that's what military do. It's not only about saving lives. We give people the opportunity to live their lives.
Right. Well said. Well said.
Yeah, that's
And I think that's
moving.
what
Powerful
Yeah,
and deep.
very. Yeah, okay.
Powerful
Yeah,
and deep.
never thought of it that way.
But was that the driving force behind you now? Because you've been overseas with our military, you supported them. You brought a lot of notoriety, knowledge of the traumatic stress, the post-traumatic stress, and all that. You began speaking on that, right? You had a career but you keep giving back, right? You have this great thing, and you unplugged, and the success of your law enforcement career, the success of you being a referee in the NBA. But now you went on this journey and wrote a second book, right, Out of the Shadows,
right,
about your trauma and everything you experienced and how to process it. Again, I kind of followed in your footsteps, but I say the way I describe it is that my career in law enforcement was a great career and it was a great legacy, but my true legacy is the work I do now for mental health and support and addiction amongst first responders and veterans. Can you speak to us about that and what you did overseas with the troops?
Yeah, I started talking about the mental health issues in covert, and then the second book I wrote was called Surviving the Shadows. And the reason I called it Surviving the Shadows, a journey of hope into post-traumatic stress, it's an education about post-trauma, but it's also that I believe we all have shadows. Mm-hmm. And I say to people, never be afraid of a shadow, because in order for a shadow to exist, there has to be light nearby. So it's our responsibility to ourselves and to each other to get to that light. And that's my hope, is that while I know the undercover job, after I surfaced, if you asked me if I do undercover work again, I'd say no.
Right.
Yeah.
But now I understand that there is no testimony without a test. Yeah. And that while that job was about putting away a lot of bad people, and it did, it really has opened a door to help a lot of good people understand what they're going through. Mm-hmm. And so, as you said, I've spent time with the military. I still do. Brian Fenton is our 4-star general in charge of special operations at this time. He has me very active in helping our military, especially our special forces, understand what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
Education and awareness works. We've done it with HIV, AIDS. We've done it with alcohol, drugs, and tobacco. The more that we're educated about a subject, the better we interact with it. Right. It's not about ending post-traumatic stress. It's about understanding how do we navigate it. And so my experience is a story that is an edutainment. It's entertaining and it's education at the same time. So we're able to take this story, and General Odierno, who was the chief of the Army years ago, said, they'll listen to you. You got an undercover story. You go in with the mob, and then you go in the NBA. Then you talk about post-traumatic stress versus coming in actually acting as if there's something wrong with them, and we're talking and saying, cops and firefighters, military, you start bringing this subject up, they lean back.
Yeah.
I was taught, my generation, probably your generation as well, drink it away, kid.
Yep.
Yeah.
Stuff it down.
Drink it away.
Oh, yeah.
Go have a drink and just flush it. Forget about it. How do you forget about people dying in front? How do you forget about a homicide scene? How do you forget about a fatal accident? Right. It's what your job is, but you're still a human being.
Yeah.
And so what I offer to folks, especially those that either have creds, uniforms, when you put that on, you become another person. Mm-hmm. You become an expert at keeping emotions away from you in order to do your job.
Bob, you're dealing with tier 1 special operations guys, right?
Yes.
And I'm listening to you talk, and I'm wondering to myself, like, why would they listen to you? Why would they give you credibility? And you just said they do. And I had a really good friend. He went through some really hard times in PTSD, and I was like, I don't deserve to have it. I didn't do what you did. I shouldn't feel this way. And he said, PTSD is not a competition to see who got hurt more than someone else. So I think it's interesting that, these tier 1 special operations guy did the most dangerous things in the world will sit here and listen to a New Jersey state trooper who went through what you went through and call that equal.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a fist bump on that, because your man told you something really. I offered people not to be judgmental. I was called in after the shootings down at Fort Hood. General Cohn, if you remember, was the commander at the time. And I had just come back from spending time in Iraq. And General Brown, who I was with over there, said to General Cohn, get this guy Delaney over. And I helped them to process what they were going through. And one of the things that we learned early on, I said, General, we got to change this thing up. well, we're bringing everybody together and talking to them, and people become judgmental. Not judgmental of me to you, judgmental within themselves, saying, I can't say a word. I wasn't in the building when the shooting took place. I didn't lose anybody here. I was across. So we had to get people together that were through this similar experience.
Yeah.
And by putting them together, they felt more comfortable to speak about their experience. Post-traumatic stress need not be a lifelong sentence, but it may be a lifelong journey of healing. And so the triggers come back. And, I don't know, I'm a lot further out from my undercover experience and all those, but I still have nightmares.
Yeah.
I still have stuff that comes. And I speak to my wife about how do you wake somebody up from a nightmare. I speak to the troops about it, their spouses.
Yeah.
Go to the feet, kick to the feet.
Yeah.
Don't come up here, because
Get
you
hit.
come up to the neck or
They're coming at you.
and you come out and hit somebody. Think about what you would feel if you hurt someone you love.
Yeah.
These are all people. You guys did it. People who were willing to die for people that they don't know, and yet imagine if they hurt someone they knew. And so these are real conversations that need to be had around this.
Yeah.
And it's just honest. Emotions being exposed. And I use an analogy, like if I have a balloon over my head, how do I get the air out of the balloon?
Yeah.
I could take a pin and pop it, I get the air out. I could let it go, it flies all over the room, it goes out the back door. We don't know what happened to the balloon. But if we're patient and willing to listen to sounds we do not want to hear, it may even hurt our ears. We turn it upside down. We let a little air at a time. It makes that noise. But eventually we get a balloon that we can use again one day. We get all the air out. We can use this balloon again. That's us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to get it out. And I'm not saying get it all out, but you got to get a good percentage of it out. I've written multiple books, been interviewed. I tell people all my stuff's not on the street yet.
Right.
You hold on to some
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you don't want to let that go.
Yeah.
You hold on to, but by letting it out, I feel lighter.
Yeah.
And being able to have this conversation like here, this is therapeutic, man.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Well, I think that was a
feel
game
it.
changer for me. It was a game changer in my career, not knowing you, having never met you before today, having that connection to you and having that understanding. I can't tell you how powerful your trainings were. Even though you didn't meet them for trainings for us, everything I learned from reading your book or identifying with you and following what you were doing helped me be a better undercover. I was an operative for 10 years before I started implementing. Nobody taught me breath work, HRV, heart rate variability, how to control my emotions. When you feel that tingling sensation when you go into an op and you walk in a room of 19, 25 guys that are all killers in the room, right? Those experiences, how do you control your heart rate?
Right.
Like that's things that you inspired me, I think, and that's what we brought to the trainings. The government gave us great training, but they never focused on the training that you had inspired me to look into, to find out how do I control these. He always says to me, I don't know how you go into these organizations. You go into these different cultures, terrorism, organized crime, spy work, and it's the work that you taught me, like controlling my emotions, identifying the trauma, turning that trauma into a secret power, like a superpower. You can literally, once you learn how to control your emotions and you realize that your brain and your gut and your heart are all connected to one, man, it's a game changer. Then he used to say, like, I don't know how you go into these things and you could just be super chill, super cool. Well, you turn it on and off like an oven.
Exactly.
You turn the heat up, you turn it down. You know?
And that quick blood that runs through you. I always say that blood is running. That blood
man.
is running through you quick. And like, how do you control it? And early on, I didn't know how. And so you have to develop techniques.
You mess up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You make
start
mistakes
talking
and the
fast.
adrenaline.
You talk too much. You listen to your own.
Right.
Once you listen to the tapes and you go, what the freak? We're not making a case against me. Why am I talking so much?
Perfect example, right? It's 25 minutes of a tape and 20 minutes is you bullshitting and just filling with hot air. And like you said, the balloon just spewing it all over the place. And you listen back and go, why did I even say that?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's a game changer.
But being
so.
student of yourself is extremely important.
Yeah.
Before you work undercover, during undercover, and after undercover.
Yeah, very much so.
Talking about undercover, and you were a state trooper and not very long in uniform, but you probably seen some traumatic things there too. But uniform personnel go through a different kind of trauma. And I think we hold ours in and we hold on to it because there's no one to tell about, but theirs is right in their face all the time. It's not only anxiety, they smell it, they sense it, they see it. Yep. Do you think that people in uniform, military, police, troopers, anybody versus covert operators are dealing with the same amount of PTSD or the same amount of stressors?
Yeah, it was interesting. Once my bosses heard that I was speaking a little bit more to undercovers and detectives about the emotions of the job at the academy, they asked me to speak to the uniforms, and I thought to myself, oh, I wasn't in uniform that long. How do I? And then I come to the realization we all have our first fatal accident, and that first fatal accident, they can give you all the training they want with photographs and of homicides or fatal accidents, and it's not until you see death in its truest form that you understand it. And I was a Dudley Do-Right kind of kid. I didn't drink overly, and I didn't smoke, and I wasn't exposed to that kind of thing as a kid. I'm 21 years old. First accident, a fatal accident I go to, I got 1 month on the job. It's Gary Rinkers, my senior trooper, and myself, and it's 2 kids on a motorcycle with a truck on Route 202 in Flemington, New Jersey. I don't have to go into the grisly details, but he had been down this road many times, and there's nothing to do once it's deemed fatal. It's you hold this down until the fatal accident experts come, and we have a unit that come out, and you hold it down. He takes out a cigar and starts smoking, and we flared it out, and I'm not going to do it, but I could feel my body. There was something different, and my body, I could tell my body was shaking, and I was embarrassed that he was going to see that and think I couldn't do this job, and trying to act cool. An ambulance worker happened to be walking by. He was smoking a cigarette. I figured I could hang on to one of those. I'll look cool. And I said, hey, pal, I'll take one of those. And it was a Camel Unfiltered. I took a hit on that. I thought I was going to pass out and throw it. We got back to the state police station. I went into the stall of the bathroom, and I cried my eyes out. And I did it quietly, and I sobbed quietly in hopes that no other trooper would hear me. Because from my view, they would not want to go on patrol with me. They would think I was too weak to do this job, and I would just be vilified within the station. And yet, when I had the courage to tell that story to a group of troopers, when it was over, half of them came up and said, I went through the same thing. What is personal is universal. If you're going through something, somebody else is. And if we are willing to have that conversation, we give permission to each other to have the conversation, and we validate each other's feelings. It's not necessary to be sitting on a couch with a psychologist. It may get to that level, but more often than not, when you have somebody within law enforcement that you can trust and open up with, that's that release that we need to talk about.
Yeah, and it's great to see all these departments across the nation putting peer support teams together. Because that's where the real work is done. Peer-to-peer is where it's at.
Exactly.
Eventually you might have to see a licensed clinician or somebody to really work it through, but peer-to-peer is everything. Just to have that. For so many years of operating and you hit it on the head. I was taught, we go over, it's Jersey. The bars close at 2 or 3 in the morning. After you're done here, you go to New York, you drink, and then it's mugs and eggs in the morning. Don't have it. We're not talking about this. Don't talk about this scene. Don't bring it up again and stuff it down. Now it's good to see all these operators and again, it transcends across first responders and veterans all over. Talking about it.
And another area that you just triggered is humor. We use tremendous amount of humor. The best lines I've ever heard are at homicide scenes or at fatal accidents. But helping cops and military to understand where we are today, we understand that humor is used to distance yourself from the reality. You're only doing it to be able to steal your emotions so that you don't accept what's taking place in front of you, so you do your job. But we have to be so aware of today, microphones, phones. People will think these are cold-hearted people doing these. No, these are highly empathetic people that understand what can happen to themselves, so they have to use humor to distance themselves from the ugliness that they're seeing in front of them. And that's an important part for our people to understand as well. Cops, military, firefighters, those who serve see what the rest of the world does not. And so how do you process that? I to me, it's a focus that'll be my last breath on earth will be about doing this kind of work.
Well, you talked, was it your dad was in World War II or your grandfather?
My dad.
And their deal was never talk of it. I lived with my grandpa. He was in World War II, and we would just beg him for stories, and it was just better for him. And I mean, we lived in neighborhoods with people that were maybe didn't serve side by side. We're in World War II together, and it just never came up.
But that was a difference, right?
That's how we handled it.
That generation was, it took them 3 to 4 to 6 months to get home from where they were. So there was processing with each other on those ships or on those planes. They were processing. There was a camaraderie. I would remember walking down the street of my grandfather's home, and my father would say to me, Jimmy was in the Army. Tommy was in... they knew they were together. Today, there's only 1% to 2% that serve in the military. There's a small percentage that serve in law enforcement. They only have each other to speak to. They're not going to unpack their locker with someone that's a civilian.
Right.
So there's this feeling of, who do I go to? And while our military is very good with battle buddies,
Yeah.
then they come home and one gets transferred to California, another gets transferred over, and now I'm like, what am I going to do? Tell my story to another guy that's got another story?
Right.
And so
That's
we're
become
limiting them, and we're finding the special forces groups, because they're so close knit and they're together, that they're having less of
They handle it better.
Yeah, they handle the things better. They're highly qualified, and these conversations are being had, and education is being given to them, so they're able to understand and process it better. And think back, like, you guys were kids during the Vietnam War, but the Vietnam War movies taught people to think that everybody that came home from Vietnam is crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we taught people.
Right.
And so the assumption was, if you wore a fatigue jacket, walk on
they
the other
watch
side
out.
of the street,
Yeah.
there's
Look
something
out.
wrong with that guy.
Yeah.
There wasn't something wrong with them.
No.
They were still processing.
Yeah.
And that's why today, watch that old-time Vietnam veteran. You know, they still dress in the 60s and the 70s.
do.
They
Yep.
still look the same.
Yeah.
But they're so protective of those Iraq and Afghanistan troops, because
Very
they
much
know
so.
what they went through.
Yeah, very much
And they're
so.
very protective of them.
Yeah, very much so. And just to wrap up where they are now, kind of thing. Obviously, these guys, most of the guys aren't around now. You know, Tina Fumara passed away of cancer a few years back. I forget how long ago it was. John DiGilio met his ultimate demise by his own guys. Actually, it was a retired Bayonne cop that did him. That was in his crew, Georgie Weingartner, and they actually got killed by his own.
I knew George well.
Yeah,
George had the truck stop over going over into Jersey City.
in Kearney.
Yeah.
And-
Kearney,
yeah.
exactly. Yep.
So, you know, which is a movie in itself and a story, and just to show throughout the whole career was murder and mayhem. And DiGilio wound up, he was like an early Gotti. He thought he was a Teflon Don. He was on trial for a while in Newark and thought he could beat the case, and then he just got too lippy for himself, so they decided to rub him out. It was actually a cop that did him, a retired cop.
And Jackie DiNorzio became the movie Find Me Guilty.
Find Me Guilty, which is
Vin
great.
Diesel
Yeah,
played
Vin
him,
Diesel
and
played him.
sounds exactly like
Yeah,
him.
he did a
And
great job.
Jackie was wacky as a bedbug, but Vin Diesel picked up on every one of his nuances.
Yeah.
And the same thing, like when you look at the movie Donna Brasco, Johnny Depp really picks up
Yeah,
on Joe's
without a doubt.
mannerisms.
Without
It's
a
amazing
doubt,
how
yeah.
they become like the person.
Yeah, Coppola went on a run, right?
Right.
He survived that kid, got convicted and whatnot, but then he went on a run for 10 years, and you know, he was on a run for the longest time. The Bureau was looking for him, and Coppola was hysterical because they looked for him for years. They thought he had rumors he had plastic surgery, rumors that he was out of the country. The whole time, I think he was living like in New York.
Yeah.
Not that far away, huh?
Michael bounced. He was down in Florida for a while. Then he went over to Italy for a while. Then he came back, and then he was going to see his son in New York
Yeah.
at an apartment.
He did.
Is when the
And
Bureau,
it's a great story
Bureau
because,
picked him up.
and I don't want to go off on a tear, but the Bureau was looking for this guy for 10 years. 10 years, bro. They had thrown everything at the kitchen sink. He was like the Whitey Bulger, right?
Right.
So they had squads out. They found out he was visiting his kid in the New York area. They might have him pinned down to a location. So you can only imagine all these veteran agents. They want to be the one to capture this guy. So you had all these old, you know, organized crime agents out
Yeah.
there and, you know, working overtime. And it's a Sunday morning, I think it was, right? And this kid, brand new agent, he gets like Sunday morning because nobody wants to work Sunday mornings. And he's sitting there and he's like, this guy comes out of the building, walks down the street, grabs a bagel, grabs a newspaper, sticks it on his arm, and the kid's just looking at him. Like, man, it kind of looks familiar. It looks like the guy we're looking for. Doesn't say anything. Coppola walks up to the car and locks eyes with the kids and pretty much turns around, rests the bagel on the car, puts the newspaper down, and the kid gets out of the car like, yeah, he goes, you got me. It's me.
He was done.
And that's how his demise
He was
came.
done.
You know? He
And
was
then I
finished.
testified against
Yeah.
Michael in 2009. I think I went back and testified in federal court in Brooklyn. He was charged with the murder of Johnny Coca-Cola Lardier over at the Red Bull Inn in Somerville. And that's where the story comes from, The Sopranos, where, remember when Gandolfini's nephew goes to shoot a guy and the gun jams?
Yeah.
And he says, what are you going to do now, tough guy? That's actually from the story of Michael Coppola with
Okay.
Johnny Coca-Cola Lardier. And And Michael was not found guilty on the murder charge, but additional RICO. I think he's in a halfway house now, or if not out.
Right.
Did you testify in front of Congress, or?
I did. I testified before the United States Senate. I gave a briefing to Congress in 1981 on organized crime. It was the Senate hearings on organized crime in the United States at the time, an update kind of thing. Senator Sam Nunn was the head. Senator Rudman, Senator Glenn, John Glenn, a variety of them. So I was assigned there for 3 months, and Louis Freeh was there as well. I believe Joe testified.
You testified for 3 months?
No. So when you have hearings, it's like being assigned to a joint task force.
Okay.
Everybody comes in, and you work on those hearings for 3 months before the hearings are actually heard. The hearings took place over about 3 or 4 days.
It's just case prep then, basically,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, it's case prep. And showing exactly what you guys have in
This
the Mob
global
Museum,
impact and everything?
showing the impact that it has. And what came out of it back in the 80s was we wanted to prove that putting them in prisons in locales that they have still an influence is a big problem, because now they have people coming in and out, and they're strong-arming the weaker inmates and getting their visitor passes, and you're having a whole team come in here. We had to send people further away and move them on occasion, multiple times, to be able to make sure we're disrupting this from the prisons. And so that was one of the elements, but it was also to show the influence of the longshoremen and all the unions on the waterfront, because we saw that firsthand. And that was what was being brought up in these hearings. And so there's a whole case prep and getting that organized.
Kind of showing like the lack of accountability on the ports and stuff like that, like how Wild West it really was.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's looking for you to make an impact as far as criminal charges go.
Yeah.
And it really, as a senior investigator, you start to realize sometimes it's not the amount of bodies that are arrested from a case. It's the intelligence gleaned. And what did we learn from it? That's what we learn when we go back to a case and look how you show how the ports are being used, how the trucking industry, the unions are being manipulated. That's the intelligence gathering that you
Like
had.
in Jersey now, the Waterfront Commission been disbanded. So the New Jersey State Police has taken over as the New Jersey State Police Port Unit. I'm being brought back up to speak to kids that probably weren't even born that are detectives now, of helping them understand what is the history here. And a lot of things are it's not much different. It's just they adapt into the 21st century. So
they're still doing the same stuff.
I'll give you. We'll close with this story. So I go down to the port one day with Larry Ricky, one of Tino's guys, and we were doing something about the trucks. But Larry said, "I got to pick up the dental plan money," and he said, "Okay, whatever you got to do, man." And we were up at the port, and he goes to the foreman, and he says, "You got the envelopes?" And so there were envelopes with $20 in every envelope. And he says, "One of the guys wants to talk to you." Mr. Larry, this guy comes up, Portuguese guy. He worked on the docks. He says, "My daughter has the problem with the teeth, needs the braces. I paid a dental plan." Larry looks at him. It was like something out of a movie. He hits him in the chest with the back of his hand. He says, "You know the dental plan? That's to keep your own fucking teeth. Now get the hell out of here."
Oh my God.
So
Everybody's paying a $20 bill.
The intimidation. They're paying a dental plan that's cash.
Right.
That was the influence that they had on the waterfront.
Yeah. They're just taking advantage of everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're still doing a racket. Look, you fast forward into he and I infiltrated the mafia together, and the rackets are still the same. The ports are still the ports. Everything's coming in from the ports. It changes drastically. Some containers that come in, they have trackers on them. But even in 2012, 2000, that era, we were still getting around it.
Right.
The rackets don't change. Cigarettes are still gold in the street.
Right.
They don't reinvent themselves. The culture changes and people that they're dealing with, but it's all the same rackets. But
They came to me one time and said, "You got to get a truck that can pick up cars, a tow truck." I said, "Okay, what do we need a tow truck for?" He said, "We're going to paint it up Newark PD." He said, "The Robert Treat Hotel downtown, Newark. Everybody goes in for the 2-hour businessman lunch on Fridays. We could yank cars there all day long, and we'll just do one hit because they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But we could pull like multiple cars that day, and think about it. Johnny Law will be stopping the traffic for us because they'll see the official police tower.
Yeah.
So they wanted to mimic. And I'm like, what the freak we're going to be doing? Out at the Meadowlands. At the Meadowlands, when it first opened, the racetrack, in New Jersey.
Yeah.
There were gold jumpsuits for valet parkers. And so they came up with the idea, hey, we put our guys in jumpsuits. Out on Route 46, we'll have trailers. People come in with Cadillacs, Lincolns, and back in that time frame.
Here's my keys.
Here's the keys.
Yeah.
It's the easiest way to steal a car.
Yeah.
Now you take the car and you put it on the trailer, and off we go.
Off it goes.
We take it to port and send them
we'll do
overseas.
it 2 or
something
3
like that.
hits. They'll figure out it's the valets. Then we get away from
Yeah.
that business. So you're constantly figuring what's the scam.
Just changing up the
what's
next
the
one.
scam? The next scam.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always a scam. It's always about the scam.
Right.
And the hardest part sometimes for us was even myself, you try to fight it off. At the end of my case, I was running a cruise, so I had guys reporting to me. So they were like, listen, I got a scam. I got an idea. You know, they want to pistol whip this guy, steal from this guy. And you have to pivot, you know, and you think of that's a great idea with a tow truck and with valets.
Right.
How do you go, no, that's not going to work.
Right.
When you go, yeah, that's brilliant. But we can't allow the violence. And I used to leave dinner with my guys, and 2 of them stood there one night, and we were standing outside on a cold winter night talking and saying our goodbyes. And the one guy says goodbye, and there's 2 of us left, and it was my capo's son, and he turns around and goes, listen, I was standing there for 15 minutes. That gas station across the street, everybody's paying cash. So while I was his mind was working something completely
Right.
different.
Right.
So, well, big deal. He goes, listen, it's Christmas, you know. I got to have a score. I got 2 masks and handguns in the trunk. Let's go rob this place. When in reality, in that world, that's how it works.
Right.
One scam to the next, one hustle to the next. How do you go? But as undercovers, we can't. Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go. Let's go rob it. Let's go stick this guy up.
Well, and you saying no or yes isn't that simple, because in your mind,
No.
you've been put on a spot. You're like, so I'm going to get a tow truck and paint it like a police vehicle. And now I have to pass this up my chain of investigative people and get them to agree to this, and then get the truck and then fund it. Like in the normal world, you're like, hell yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
But instead, you have to be thinking so far ahead of like, can I really commit to this? Because will the people ahead of me be like,
Exactly.
no, you're not getting a fucking tow truck and paint it like a cop car.
You're not going to get that.
Yeah.
Or you're telling a criminal mind that's a stupid idea.
Well, that's what you're telling them,
right.
but you got to think of a tactful way to avoid, like, there's no way they're going to let me
Right.
do this.
Our out always was the Waterfront Commission. If we're gonna ruin the big picture, we got big money coming. We got coming from the trucks. If we go to if I get pinched, the Waterfront Commission,
You lose
I'm
access.
clean. My background's clean.
Yeah.
I got to keep it clean.
Yeah, it's more important,
Same
more
thing was,
valuable.
I was being asked to go visit guys in prison at Rollway and Trenton State Prison. Well, concern was if I walk in there, somebody may recognize
Somebody you
guys
locked up or somebody,
the
your
guy's-
dad.
Guy's law. What is he doing in here?
Yeah.
And so it was always like, if they see me on the visitors list, we're going to have a water commission problem.
Yeah.
They're going to start looking at this
Twix
company.
cards will be
And so
revoked.
you always came up with some kind of reason, but you had to be plausible. And you know, so many of the things that you guys are talking about trigger so many stories. But I want to thank you for doing what you guys did. I mean, you bring people on here and make us the star of the show for a couple hours of talking. But thank you for what you did too, right?
No,
I mean, the work that you've done is part of the reason that this world is a better place.
You're right. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Feels good to us
again-
too. Like, it's very healing for us to come on here and speak with counterparts and people that mentored us and we looked up to and everything, and for them to be able to have that platform. The Mob Museum provides like a very neutral ground where we just get to be genuine. You tell your story, and it's healing for us too, man.
It is.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on.
Well,
We
Dutch-
appreciate your words.
Any door we got to go through, you're going through first.
Heck yeah, I like going first. I'm in.
I'm right behind you, brother.
The only door I'm going through is to someplace nice with a nice drink in my hand. There's no more battering rams and guns for me. Man.
We appreciate you coming in, and we appreciate everything you've done. You blazed a trail. I mean, you really, truly have. Maybe not knowing in the beginning, but you blazed a trail for guys like us, and the work you did continues to be infectious in the covert world. I mean, the guys have learned so much from us, and we just continue passing on what you taught us. So it's humbling to sit here. It's humbling to have these conversations with you, Bob. It truly is. And
Thanks, G.
And thanks for making the time.
Thanks,
Thank
Dutch.
you.
Appreciate
pleasure,
it. Good to
man.
be
Thank
here.
you.
Good to be in the Mob Museum.
No, thanks for having us.
For behind-the-scenes photos, merchandise, and exclusive content, visit InsideTheLife.org. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get podcasts.